Next, I'd like to introduce Maggie Lloyd. She's a senior here at MIT in chemical biological engineering. She's the captain of the women's varsity cross country and track teams and served as the president of the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, a group focused on providing support for the student athlete community in MIT. As an editor for The Tech, MIT's campus newspaper, she has been inspired by the many stories she has seen and has heard from around campus. Tonight, she will talk about some of these stories, as well as some of her own, and how they have defined her MIT career.
I love telling stories, and I think the best stories are the simplest ones. So my story begins at a water park in Hershey, Pennsylvania last summer. I was with a friend who also happened to be an MIT student, and we were talking about classes and whatnot, when the guy behind us catches on that we're MIT students. And he starts to ask the typical questions, you know, like, what's it like, and what kind of classes do you have to take, and my personal favorite, is it really hard? But then he asked us this question, what is the best thing about MIT? It's kind of a heavy question for waiting line conversation, but we humor him and we reflect on it and we say, the people. Now, Water Park Man is not amused. He says, the people? Everyone says the people. What does that even mean? And I have to admit, Water Park Man had a good point. I didn't know how to answer this question back then, but I think I do now. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the types of people that go to MIT. We all know that MIT is full of committed individuals, people who are committed to research and collaboration and innovation and leadership. But what all the news articles and science journal publications don't show is MIT's commitment to life. At MIT, we have engineers and scientists, but we have writers and athletes and sorority sisters and fraternity brothers and dancers and singers and artists, and we all build off of each other's ideas when things are going really well. But we need to learn to support each other when things aren't going so well so that we can learn from each other's mistakes. And this is a lesson that I learned about 2.5 years ago. It was my first semester as a chemical engineer at MIT, and I had this project that was crashing and burning. And I made this realization at office hours 2 days before the deadline. So at office hours, I collected my items, and I left the classroom. I leaned against the wall outside the room, and I started to sob, like epically. And I'm not embarrassed to tell this story because I'm smiling as I'm telling it now, so I must have learned something from this experience. But I was not smiling back then, trust me. This was my first MIT breakdown. And it was because I did not know how to deal with failure. But luckily for me, there were people on the campus who did. My friend came out of office hours, and she came to look for me, and she just kind of saw me there. And she said, we're going to go talk to the professor. And by some massive stroke of luck, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, he was still in his office and was more than willing to just sit down and talk with us and see where I was having problems and what was going wrong with my project and how I could salvage the bits and pieces of MATLAB code that I clung onto so tightly. And I felt so relieved after this conversation. And I started to see that I could get this project done. I wouldn't sleep for the next 2 days, but I could get it done. And it was all because of his support. So you see, there's this theme at MIT of support between people at the Institute. So many of us are willing to give this help to each other, but so few of us are willing to ask for it initially. And if I could tell my sophomore self one thing, it would be to go out and seek that support when I realized I wasn't going to meet my commitment. And this is what takes me to my next story. So I'm on the track team here at MIT, and I have a fellow teammate and captain named Lauren. She's a junior, and she's a pole vaulter, but track wasn't always her sport. Lauren is passionate about gymnastics, and it's very obvious when you talk to her about it. She's been involved in gymnastics since, she could practically walk. And she always had this dream of competing on a college varsity gymnastics team. Now, after Lauren had enrolled in MIT, the varsity gymnastics team here was actually cut, along with 7 other athletics teams. And her dream was gone. And like any person, she felt devastated, she felt angry, but instead of just giving up on that dream or transferring to another school, Lauren still had that commitment to compete on a varsity team. She started sending emails. She tried to talk to as many coaches as possible, and there was only one who responded to her saying that she could walk onto the team. It was the track coach, and he figured that a gymnast could make a good pole vaulter. At her first meet, Lauren vaulted a little over 7 feet, which is not good. So soon after realizing her dream of joining a varsity team, she was at risk of being cut from the roster because she was so far behind her other teammates. But the assistant vault coach saw something in her. She had this great potential and amazing work ethic. And he said, no, Lauren should stay on this team. And she did. And today she's a 2-time All-American. She's been to nationals 3 times. She's hoping to go for her 4th time next week. She is one of the top 3 women pole vaulters in MIT history. She vaults over 12 foot 6 inches. I mean, Lauren is committed. And not only that, but she was able to find the support to accomplish the thing that she was committed to. And it was such an inspiration for me when I was hearing this story. And I realized I couldn't be that sobbing sophomore in the hallway anymore. That if anything ever came up against me when I was trying to reach my goals, that didn't mean that it was all a failure and that it was all hope was lost. I was able to put this lesson into place when I was the president of the Student Athlete Advisory Committee. And this is a group on campus of varsity athletes whose mission is to just support the student athlete community here at MIT. And this spring, we were promoting a program called Athlete Ally, which takes a stand against homophobic and transphobic harassment in athletics. There were no political implications, nothing to do about religious beliefs with this. All we wanted to say was that all athletes, no matter who they are, deserve to feel like they belong to this team. And I'd never been involved with something like this before, but a student had brought it to my attention, and I thought it was a good lesson to share with the MIT community. And so we drafted this letter to be published in the school newspaper that was going to tie in with the same day as an anti-bullying event that was happening on campus. But as news of our promotion of this program started to spread, I started to get some very negative feedback. I was questioned whether my committee had the authority to use the undergraduate email list to promote this event. I was told to go back to supporting athletics. And it was at that exact moment that I realized there was some misunderstanding here about our objective, because the name of the program is Athlete Ally. The whole reason it exists is to support athletes. And then one night, when I was on my computer, I saw this online forum where students were talking about this situation. And it was very hard to read. There were all these anonymous negative comments, and it made me realize just how widespread this misunderstanding was. Now, I'm going to tell you something that I haven't told anyone. I was scared. And not only that, I was scared to say I was scared, because I was the leader of this group that had helped start the whole thing in the first place. And I could feel that sophomore self inside of me just wanting to run and hide and get away from the problem as soon as possible. I seriously considered canceling the letter that was going to be published in the newspaper because I hate conflict that much. But I had made this commitment to support student athletes, and I wasn't going to let it go. So I did the thing that sophomore Maggie would have absolutely hated to do. I addressed the issue face first. I went on to this online forum and I left a comment with my full name on it. Who cares? I wanted them to know who I was and what I stood for. And essentially all I said was, this is my opinion and this is why I support this program. No one deserves to be harassed. That's it. And we went ahead and we published the letter. And in the next 24 hours, I got more emails and Facebook mentions than I could have possibly imagined. And they were all from people I'd never met before, from good friends, from athletes, from non-athletes. And they were all in support of my message. And even today, someone will see me in the elevator and they will say, "Thank you for what you said." We never realize the true effects of our actions. But for me to finally be on the giving side of support at MIT and to feel like I was making this difference in somebody's life in this community, I mean, oh my gosh, you guys, it was just so great. And I know I've told a lot of stories this evening, and when I think back on all of them, there are 2 lessons that come to mind. One, MIT is full of committed individuals in and out of the classroom. That's a fact. But secondly, it has this great potential to be a support network. And it's that support that really makes a difference in our commitments. It inspires, it motivates. And if you still don't believe me, I have one more simple story for you. Once upon a time, there was an engineer. She was supported by a good friend and a good professor in her early years at MIT. She was inspired by her teammates. And these individuals, in turn, were supported by their academic departments, their extracurriculars, their coaches, their peers. So the engineer took this lesson to heart, and she took action. And she started to support other individuals on the campus. And the support grew and grew. And she started to realize that other things she was involved in could be connected back to each other, forming this intricate web of support on the MIT campus. And before you know it, you have an entire community of individuals committed to looking out for each other. And it is a great thing. Stay committed, MIT.